Good morning, Mets fans, and welcome to a Monday edition of Driving with Mr. Met. I am Mr. Met, and one of the things about doing this, not doing this every day, I should say, is my memory's not as good as it used to be, and I'm starting to forget what it is I talked about the last time I recorded. So I think I recorded last on Friday, but I could even be wrong about that. I don't even remember what day it was. But I do have a couple of things I want to talk about today, and I'm crossing my fingers that I haven't already talked about them last week. Perhaps it's a sign of old age that I can't remember what it is I was talking about, but I do know one of the recurring themes that I've had really over the hot stove season, or the off season thus far, was that nothing was really going to happen until there was some clarity on what was going to happen with Giancarlo Stanton. And we are getting closer to getting some answers there as it pertains to Stanton, because it looks as though there are framework deals in place with both the Cardinals and the Giants to trade with the Marlins for Giancarlo Stanton. So at this moment, there appear to be two legit suitors for Miami's slugger. And, over the weekend it was announced that the Red Sox dropped out, or were no longer in the running, if you will. And that's kind of a bummer, because I'm looking at it like, let's get Stanton as far away as possible so that we only have to see him like 3 times a year, and he can stop hitting home runs in Citi Field. I don't even want him in the National League if we can avoid it. But in any event, San Francisco and St. Louis seem to be numbers 1 and 2 in no particular order. And speaking of one of those teams, over the weekend again, there was some news released about Shohei Ohtani. It looks as though he's got his choices sort of narrowed down, and I hate to say it, not to say that I was Nostradamus, but I sort of called this. I said Seattle, San Francisco, and I think those were the two teams that actually, and maybe San Diego I might have mentioned, but I think those were the two teams, the Dodgers and the Angels. Yeah, those were the teams that I mentioned as most likely landing places for Ohtani. And, excuse me, it's now down to San Francisco and Seattle. Those seem to be the again, numbers 1 and 2 choices for Ohtani. He told the Yankees they were out over the weekend, and basically the reason that the kid is giving is that he doesn't really want to play in a big market. And that's interesting. He'd rather play in a small market. He's small kind of personality. So between those two teams in Seattle and San Francisco, if I were him, I would try to go and lean toward a National League club, because it would let him showcase his abilities on both sides of the ball, both as a pitcher and as a batter. Whereby if he were playing in the American League, his opportunities in either front will be limited. But imagine the kind of flexibility, like roster flexibility, that a team could have in an extra inning situation, where you don't want to pinch hit for a relief pitcher because he's doing well or whatever. Imagine if your relief pitcher is Ohtani and you don't have to pinch hit for him because the dude's a legit hitter. That's incredible. So Ohtani looking at Seattle and San Francisco. And again, I sort of called it with the Stanton thing. Nothing's going to happen until something does come to fruition with Stanton. There was one minor trade over that happened last week. The Cardinals traded their former All-Star shortstop and once big-time prospect, Aledmys Diaz, to Toronto. I didn't look into it. I don't know who St. Louis got in return. But Diaz was sort of a man without a country with the emergence of Paul DeJong last year as the new shortstop for St. Louis. So he's going to end up in Toronto. And this is, of course, a Mets podcast, so I would be remiss if I didn't mention something about the Mets. The news last week, I think it was Thursday night or Friday morning, that it was officially announced that the Mets tendered contracts to all 40 members of their roster. So there were no one non-tendered on the Mets team this year. I guess that's a good thing. I mean, I don't know that it really matters, but Mets blog wrote a couple of really good pieces about it, and the one about Harvey made the most sense to me. Like, yes, it's it's a good chunk of money, like $5 million or whatever. But the upside that's attached to that $5 million is so much better than the upside that you'd have if you had to spend that money on the free agent market to try to fill a starting pitching spot for $5 or $6 million. So no matter what anybody thinks about Harvey getting a raise, it still absolutely was the right decision. That's going to wrap it up for today. There wasn't a lot of Mets news to talk about, but again, I think in the coming weeks, once this Stanton deal makes its way through to completion, we'll have more to talk about on the Mets front. So until then, I shouldn't say until then, because I'm sure I'll be posting a video between now and then, but until the next time I post a video, I thank you for watching. If you're not already doing so, follow me on Twitter at Mr_Met. And as always, let's go Mets.